Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, thank you for joining our webinar for the WFMN Innovators program.
So thank you for making time out of your busy day. We recognize that you're all doing finals, final projects for school. So thank you again for registering and just being here to learn more about this amazing opportunity that we're going to talk to you about today.
Yep. We're going to give you a little bit of information about the Women's Foundation of Minnesota, about the Young Women's Initiative, and then talk deeper about the WFMN Innovators program. So again, we'll give you information on those three, and thank you for joining our webinar today. So my name is Brooke LaFlo. I am the Aretha Clark King Fellow and the Young Women's Initiative Program Manager here at the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. I have been here for about 7 months. I've really enjoyed my position so far, and I'm part of the community impact team with both Jasmine and Lily.
So hello, everyone. I am Jasmine Sanchez. I'm the Program Officer and Grants Manager here at the Foundation. And I've been in my role now for over 2 years. So I support the community impact team with grant making. Anything on our grant software is the work that I lead. And then we also wanted to acknowledge Sylvie Mola, our Vice President of Community Impact. She's not here with us today, but she really was, the innovator idea was her idea. And so we were just thrilled when she made this into a reality for many of our innovators and many of you who are on the webinar this afternoon. So we're just excited to share more about this opportunity with you.
So this is our team. This is the team that innovators will be able to ask questions to. You'll see us if you become selected as an innovator. And please reach out to any of us regarding questions around the application or the online portal, and we'll talk about some of that later today.
And know that we are recording this webinar. So for those of you who registered and just couldn't make it, something came up, or for a friend who wanted to register but couldn't, we will make sure we add this audio onto our website and to the Innovator RFP so that you have that link, and we'll post that probably later this week. So just know that this is being recorded, and then we'll share this resource, this webinar with others.
A little bit about this webinar. Again, we're going to give you, we introduce the staff at the Women's Foundation. We'll talk a little bit more about the Women's Foundation and how the Young Women's Initiative came to be a part of the Women's Foundation, and it is grounded in the Blueprint for Action. We'll do a little video about that. We will then move into the application process for the Innovators program, and then at the very end, we will answer any questions that people have. If you have a question through the webinar, there is a raise hand option up to the left, to the right of the screen. If you see a little hand there and you have a question, you're more than welcome to raise your hand there, as well as you can open up the questions box and type in your question then. Again, we'll answer most of them at the end, but we may take 1 or 2 questions as we go through the webinar today. So the mission and vision of the Young Women's Initiative of Minnesota is to, when we center and invest in young women of color's leadership and solutions, families and communities thrive. And our tagline that we have for this initiative that we just launched this past November is, "There's more to Minnesota when every young woman thrives." And really the notion behind that is that young women don't enter spaces alone. They are always carrying their families and communities behind them. They are always thinking of others and bringing others in the room with them. And that is the reason that we center young women of color in this initiative.
And just more background as to the Women's Foundation of Minnesota. So we are a community foundation. We're about 36 years old. And so what we do a little bit of everything. We'll talk a little bit more about what we do. So we do grant making, policy research, but really we center racial and gender equity, addressing that and how do we improve the lives of women and girls across our state.
So some more context about the Young Women's Initiative. We have an informational introductory video from when the initiative launched almost 4 years ago now, a little bit more than 3 years ago. So we'll play that video for you here. This is also on the WFMN website page on the Women's Foundation website.
As Masons, we are proud to witness each conference from now to they have an opportunity, education, and healthcare. However, another reality overshadows this comprehension. There are racial that are some resident states, particularly in color, income balance, income disparities, and opportunities, such as absence from technicals. The Women's Foundation of Minnesota is working with young women across the state to start change a more transformed future. Women have jumped in order to succeed. However, challenges of social media actually to be perfect. I'm also Latinx, I'm also African. So I think that I spent a lot of time seeing aspects of my character as being factors to my development, and aspects of my character that have this opportunity. What can we do to change this? If the young women's initiative, they are a mission to create a Minnesota where every girl has the opportunity to thrive in the champion of life. First, we listen to over 500 young women share with us the challenges and solutions. We've grown together as 25 young women leaders across 8 different communities, from 70 cross-sector leaders, corporations, government, and universities, nonprofits, who are working to advance. Over the next 6 years, we will drive solutions that transform our state. It will come to action and toward the nation's agenda, the young relationships, policy, share access to equal opportunity for young women. Funds will be invested in innovative ideas of young women and community organizations to drive change. When I think about the challenges that we face today, like our government makes of this law before. I have hurt. I believe that one thing I should collapse. For the first time in Minnesota history, we have statewide initiatives centered on young women, led by young women, and by working alongside a national gathering of young women's initiatives, we will highlight challenges and solutions, inspire action, and promote change locally and across the U.S. to ensure equity and outcomes for all young women across the country. I recognize those of which other possible. So it was very awesome. I'm I'm the path of comments where a lot of people relate to this. I don't see how all that have the path for them. I want them to path on the agent of that change. Join us. Come and chat with young women in all states and shape a better future for all.
Alrighty, thank you for that video. Again, that was the first year of the initiative that video was created. So those were some of the inaugural cabinet members, talked about the blueprint for action, and a lot of the work has transformed since then. This WFMN Innovator program was, again, the idea of Lulit Mola, our community Impact Vice President, and that was initiated in the second year of the Young Women's Initiative. So just a recap on that video, what the Young Women's Initiative is a 7-year, $9 million public-private partnership between the Women's Foundation of Minnesota and the Governor's Office of Minnesota, with the goal to create a Minnesota where every young woman and girl thrives.
And so we know that this initiative is important because data shows that the greatest disparities are faced by our young women ages 12 to 24 across Minnesota. And so earlier we talked about, so the work that we do at the Women's Foundation and through this initiative is that we ground our work in research. We support grant making. So the Innovator Project is a grant that we will be giving out to young women across our states. We also support policy that will help improve or address the disparities that young women face. And then we also leverage strategic communications to make sure that we change the narratives around disparities and then the strengths that young women themselves have. And we also want to note that the Women's Foundation of Minnesota acknowledges or defines young woman as anyone who identifies as a woman, inclusive of cisgender, transgender, and gender nonconforming and gender non-binary people between the ages of 12 and 24.
The Blueprint for Action, this is what the research behind the Young Women's Initiative that occurred in the very inaugural first year of the Young Women's Initiative. It builds upon the strengths of young women that young women already possess. The Women's Foundation had did listening sessions across the state, focused on these 8 communities: African American, African immigrant, American Indian, Asian American and Pacific Islander, Latina, LGBTQ, young women with disabilities, and young women in Greater Minnesota. And these listening sessions of 800 young women's voices and communities members built the Blueprint for Action, which is the 20 recommendations to remove barriers and increase access for young women to thrive in the state of Minnesota. And here, the Young Women's Initiative goals. All of these blueprint recommendations fall under these 3 to 4 goals. And goal 1 is build pathways to economic opportunity. Goal 2, improve safety and well-being. Goal 3, promote a state of respect and leadership with and for young women. And then goal 4, mobilize partnerships across the state and the nation. And the blueprint recommendations all fall under these 4 goals.
Yeah, so Noah, I know you're like, what is that blueprint for action? I know we talked about it in the video. I know that it is linked to the Innovator RFP, and it's also on our website, so you can kind of look at all the recommendations. And these are, again, all of the women that we did the listening sessions with said, like, these are barriers. And so to us living a healthy life, a prosperous life, and so again, that's a blueprint for action, and we do have that linked on the RFP.
Yep. So and not just barriers, but solutions as well. So the traditionally the Innovators program has allowed innovators to select any one of these blueprint options as their project focus. This year is a little bit different. We're going to be focused on 4 blueprint recommendations, which are going to come up shortly. Before we get into applicant eligibility, I just want to note again that all of this information is coming directly from the Innovator RFP. So you have all this information in a document already, and this is also being recorded, so you'll get this again. But if there's any questions, again, you can raise your hand. You can submit questions through the comment box on your GoToWebinar. As we go through some of these applicant eligibility and the process, that's where we're getting into now.
No, great. No, great. That was good, Brooke. So thank you for sharing that. And so I think we're going to step into our applicant eligibility. So who can apply? Who is eligible to apply for the Innovator RFP? So we are looking for candidates that identify as a young woman between the ages of 16 to 24. Again, as a reminder, we define young women as anyone who identifies as a woman and is inclusive of cisgender, transgender, and gender nonconforming and gender non-binary people. So we also need our eligible candidates will reside and impact in the state of Minnesota for the entire grant period. So we will share the timeline of the grant period. So it'll be a year grant period. So we know that some of you are considering going to college, maybe in another state, or maybe have to relocate for family reasons. Unfortunately, we need our candidates to reside in the state for the entire grant period. We can talk more about that as we get to other criteria. And then priority is going to be given to young women who identify with one or more of the following communities. So Black and African American, African immigrant, American Indian, Hispanic, Latina, and Asian and Pacific Islander, and LGBTQ plus disabilities, and then greater and rural Minnesota. So again, these were the communities where we did all these listening sessions that really informed the Young Women's Initiative. So that will be, these communities will be given priority. And then citizenship is not required for you as an applicant. We can talk more about that maybe on a one-by-one cases as that comes up, but know that you are encouraged to apply.
Thank you, Jasmine. So the funding criteria for the program this year, it looks similar, but again, we're just changing we're focusing in on a few recommendations. So how can the funds be used? Innovators will receive a $2,500 one-time grant paid directly to the young woman who is an innovator to support your leadership and your innovative problem solving based on recommendations 5, 17, 9, and 3 from the Blueprint for Action. We're going to do a deep dive into these specific recommendations and how they fit within the Young Women's Initiative goals. We'll give you some concrete examples and some examples of previous innovators who have been funded under these recommendations. And again, you have to reside in Minnesota for the full grant period, which is going to be 12 months. And you have to use the funds within those 12 months to do your project and carry out your project. Some general examples of projects that have been outlined, include starting or continuing a social change initiative, designing or pursuing a personal learning plan, attending a conference and sharing learnings with your community for impact,
Organizing an event for impact,
supplying resources to organize people for advocacy,
research,
or any other form of travel as part of a greater learning for yourself or for school, and that you will want to share those learnings in Minnesota for your impact. So these are some general examples. Now we're going to get into some specific examples and then some examples of innovators who have already been funded for these recommendations. So I'll start with recommendation 5 here, which it falls under the goal of building pathways to economic opportunity. Recommendation 5 is to ensure young women have opportunities and pathways to high skill, high wage careers and jobs, increase participation in STEM field and technical careers, and increase opportunities and pay for young women in female-dominated employment sectors. So some examples of this are projects could be related to social enterprise, or if you want to do any sort of entrepreneurship or business ventures, those are examples that would fall under recommendation 5.
Yeah, and so for recommendation 17, that is, we are focusing on educating young women and men about healthy relationships, harmful narratives and norms, and promoting positive self-identities to reduce violence. And so an example of that would be, how do we increase young people's understanding of or intention to be in an engagement in healthy relationships and mutual respect. So like, what is a healthy relationship? What is consent? And how do we build respect so that, young people don't experience violence.
Recommendation 9 from the blueprint falls under the Young Women's Initiative goal of promoting a state of leadership with and for young women. Recommendation 9 is to develop young women leaders, develop the capacity of young women for political and civic leadership specifically. One thing that we are going to give some priority for and some special consideration to this year is efforts that drive greater participation in addressing climate change, and that's really due to like the climate crisis we're in right now, and the fact that a lot of young people have stepped up in addressing this issue. So we want to give that some special consideration this year. Yeah.
And then lastly, we are looking at we're focusing on recommendation 3 as well. So how do we reframe harmful narratives? So how do young women promote messages that ensure other young women can experience the world without limitations? So an example of that might be increasing young women's voices, a sense of agency and power. So maybe it's like someone had an idea to create a podcast that talks about like the strengths and amazing attributes of young women across the world, and like that's shared across our communities. So that's a way of changing a narrative and increasing young women's voice.
Yep, thank you, Jasmine. So again, all of these examples are in the RFP, starting on page 3 through 4. So we're not going to go through all of them, but they're available in the RFP. They're going to be recorded on this webinar. But now we're going to get into some examples of young women who have been already funded for under these recommendations. So these were innovators who applied last year and were in the second cohort of WFMN innovators that we're going to show you now. So for recommendation 5 is Michelle Bebo. She's from Deer River, Minnesota. She had 4 blueprint recommendations that her project fit under, but again, we are giving examples of the focus for this year, and one of them is 5, enhancing career pathways. What Nichelle was able to do with her innovator funds was to create a babysitting group network in her community. She trained young women on the skills that they needed to be trained and certified childcare providers, and for her, this was a need in her community to offset reliable childcare in her community, so that young women can again enhance their career pathways so they can go to work, so they don't have as many barriers to childcare for them to advance in their career as they need. Yep.
Yeah, and then an example for recommendation 17, Rayanne Ahmed from Fridley, Minnesota. So she, again, focused on 3 recommendations, but again, we're going to highlight 17 since we're prioritizing this recommendation this time around, is prevent violence through healthy relationships. So the project that Rayanne worked on was she created these healing circles that were open to young women and members of the LGBT community. And really, these circles were to talk about how their communities are impacted by sexual violence. So they also talked about, they learned from speakers, they also covered mental health, invited mental health professionals into safe spaces so they can really have honest conversations around sexual violence.
Recommendation number 9, an example here, we have Taylor McGee from St. Paul. The one we're focusing on was develop young women leaders for recommendation 9. What Taylor was able to do with her grant funds, she is the founder of the Black Disability Collective, which is an online media campaign, and she was able to use her funds to continue expanding this project, to educate and create space for Black folks with disabilities, to share their stories, and to develop their leadership skills as young women.
And then lastly, so this is recommendation 3. So Muna Mohammed from Columbia Heights, Minnesota. So again, she focused on 2, but we're going to highlight recommendation number 3, which is reframe harmful narratives. So Muna engaged Muslim girls who are active participants in sports, and she used photography and film so as a tool to really do community building and to really tell the story of young Muslim women in sports. And so she wanted to show that young women, Muslim women and girls can develop their athletic skills and they can respect their cultural and religious practices while doing that.
So are you the next WFMN innovator? The Women's Foundation encourages young women to think creatively. We did give you some examples, but these funds can really be used these microgrant funds can be used in any unique way that can help move your leadership and ideas forward. So that is for you to think about as you pursue this opportunity. How can this opportunity be helpful for you to make effective impact in your own community? So we'll pause for 1 minute to see if anyone has any questions thus far about the recommendations, about the examples we've provided, about the previous projects that have been funded. We'll give you a few moments. If anybody has any questions, again, you can use the box to the right to raise your hand or just type in your question there. And if there's no questions, we'll just keep going. The next part of the webinar is to discuss the application. Okay, I think we're going to keep going. And if there is any questions that do come up, you can email me directly at brooke@wfmn.org. Or save your questions till the end as well. Now we're going to step into the application and how you can apply to be a WFMN innovator. There's really 2 main steps, and we're going to do a little live walkthrough with you. Step 1 is to register on our grant portal online. The Women's Foundation has an online grant portal that you'll need to go in, and we'll show you in 1 second. Go in, put in your information, and then after you do that, we at the foundation here will be prompted with an authentication to go in, approve you as an applicant, and then you'll have full access to your application at any time after that. So we want to ask that you give us 1 business day to make sure that you register online. We will approve you within 24 hours. And then upon that moment, you will have you'll have access anytime to your application where you can save, you can go back in at any time. And just a note, as you are registering, Internet Explorer users have often run into issues within the portal. So we recommend using Google Chrome or Firefox as your browser. And if you have any issues registering, again, you can contact me at brooke@wfmn.org, and I can walk through the step with you as well. But we're going to show you right now what step 1 looks like before we go into step 2.
All right, so this is Jasmine again. So we're going to just do a little switch here to pull up our grant portal application, and just give us a second here. So this is linked to the RFP, so application on our website. So this is how it looks like when you register as a new user on our grant portal. So we need your first name, your email address, all those details, a password that you can remember. Obviously, you can also do a password hint, and if you have any issues with that, please let us know. We could do something on the back end. So you want to fill out the information that's starred here, and then you want to accept the terms and conditions. And then you also want to make sure that you click that you are an innovator, so that'll take you to the innovator application because you're applying as an individual. And then obviously you fill out, you see that as I clicked that, then more information, it prompted me for all this information. So your address, city, state, phone number, etc. And then you click register. So when you do that, then we'll get a message on our back end. And again, as Brooke was saying, then we'll make sure that within 24 hours, we accept you as a new user so that you can log on and work on your application. So I just then also want to show you what the application looks like on our portal. Let me just log in real quick here. It just expired as we were starting off this webinar. Then obviously you're going to use your own login information, and you're going to log in as an individual to access all of this information. So give me 1 second here. I'm just going to, no, did not like, oh, here we are. Did not like that. Give me 1 sec. But as you see, this should be pretty straightforward as you log in, and there are a save as you go option so that you can, work on the application. Maybe you gotta run to work or whatever. You can save whatever you've worked on, and then log in again and then continue your application. So this is just a preview of the application. So again, we have the RFP kind of mapped out on the front at the beginning. So all the things we've shared with you in this webinar, all the things we shared with you on the RFP, it's all here again, just as a reminder. Again, the eligibility and criteria, video submission. So we will talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but that's part of the application process, also a video. And there's a link down here where you can submit that video link. Personal information, so what's your name, your preferred pronouns, birthday, etc. Project outline and attachment. So this is the questions in the RFP. So you'll get to answer them here in text. And then again, we know that over time, young women have had a series of frequently asked questions. So we have answers here for you. And then lastly, we do have some more uploads, so a resume and then a letter of recommendation that we're asking as part of the application process. So I just wanted to show you this is what it looks like. And then you have to register on our grant portal page. And again, it's all linked to the RFP.
So Jasmine walked through how to get through step 1 through the registration. And then step 2, she also went through many of the applications, or many of the attachments for the application. In the RFP is all of the questions. The last page was the resume, is a separate upload. The completed project outline questions was on one of the tabs there that you've seen where you can type in the answers to your questions. So if you want to do it in a separate document and copy and paste, that's fine. In the RFP, all of these questions are on page 7 to think about. I will point out that the one that is not required is the project. If you are not doing recommendation 9, you do not need to talk about how your project addresses climate change. If you are doing recommendation 9, again, that's one that we are giving some special consideration to this year. That will be an additional question that we want you to answer. A completed project budget, that's a separate upload as well. That's on page 9, not 7, that's on page 9. Oh, page 9 of the RFP. If you have any questions on how to complete a budget, if you need examples, please email me at brooke@wfmn.org, and I can share some examples of what a project budget looks like as well.
And know that the project budget that we have is very straightforward. We actually have a template that you can use on the application portal. You can just click on the downloadable link, and then you can save that on your desktop, and then you can fill it out, and then you just upload it when you're done with the template.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be, it's $2,500. It doesn't need to be a comprehensive budget of I'm buying 1 stack of paper, just, a general outline of your budget. It doesn't need to be 20 to 40 items. It can be generally following your outline of what you want to do with your questions. And then again, the letter of recommendation, is on that final attachments page with the resume, and then the video submission link. So WFMN wants you to submit a video, kind of talking about yourself. There's a few questions there. We want to hear about you. We want to hear about your community and which community from the Young Women's Initiative that you identify with, how you demonstrate leadership to create change in your community in that video, about the vision for your community, about the vision for your project and how it relates back to your community. And then lastly, for your video submission link, we want to hear about which recommendation that you would like to move forward and how you would like to move that forward. So that's in addition to your completed project outline. In the application here, let me go back, we have a ton of resources for the video, for video submissions. So here are the questions again. If you want some resources, there's YouTube. You can use Google. If you have a Snapchat and you want to make collective videos there and piece them together using a video creator or video maker, you can do it however you need to do it. It does not need to be a professional video. We really just want to see you and hear from you as a young woman about your ideas of how you want to carry out your project. If you need help with this, feel free to reach out to me again. Check through this, use these links first. We will do the best you can, and then any help you would need on this video. We don't want it to be a barrier, so just please be in touch with me if it's becoming too difficult or too hard. And when you do finish your video, you can just include the URL right here. So we'll go back. That is step 2. Once you have all of those uploads done, with your questions, your video, your budget, your letter of recommendation, and resume, you're able to submit your grant request and grant proposal.
Yeah, and so you'll notice that as you log onto the application, there are everything that is required will be like marked as a pink box, and then when you've submitted everything, every link or every attachment is squared away, then it will turn the boxes will turn white, and that's how you'll know you have everything that you need. If you don't have all the material, the application will let you submit, so just double check everything. And then for the video, again, as Brooke was saying, keep it real simple. Like the majority or someone in our lives has potentially a smartphone that we could borrow. Like it doesn't have to be super complex. It's straightforward. We just really want to hear like, what is your idea and why are you excited to, pursue this opportunity, and how can we support you in your leadership development with the opportunity?
Yep. And just to highlight, that video is only 2 to 3 minutes. So it's not, we're not asking you to write an essay for this video. It is really an informal get to know you. We want to see you and see your project and how you're innovating with your ideas.
Yeah, and know that we won't be sharing the video with the entire website, our website, or people we know. It really is for us and ours. We have a committee that will help us decide who gets elected for the micro grant. So no, again, we're not sharing this with anyone if you don't. And then there is a question on the application process that if you don't want to share this, then you just mark no, and then we'll make a note of that.
Yeah. So no one will see your video except for the committee and then the staff that you've seen earlier that we introduced from the community impact. So that is the application and attachments. We're going to share the timeline with you for the whole process of the Innovator applications. They opened on November 26th. Today is the informational webinar to go through this, through the RFP, how to log on to the portal, how to start your application, and the requirements. If you have any more questions outside of this webinar that we did not cover, just email myself directly and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you and chat about any further questions you have. The applications are due by 5 p.m. on January 7th. So I will encourage you all to make sure that you do not wait to the last moment to submit your application. If you can have everything in there and done by January 6th so that you're ready to submit, review it the next day and submit the next day, that would be great in case you run into any technical difficulty issues. You'll have that whole day on the 7th to get in contact with myself or Jasmine if you're having any portal issues, any last questions. Try and make sure you have all of your information in there before the 7th. You can submit it early. There's no deadline to submitting early. You can submit it early, but 5 p.m. on January 7th is the absolute cutoff for submitting applications for this year of the WFMN cohort Innovators.
Yeah, and make sure that, as we are asking for a letter of recommendation, so please make sure you give the person you're asking, so is a teacher, maybe a faith leader, or someone who knows you really well, can talk about your leadership capacity. Make sure you give them time as well and let them know that this is what you're applying for and this is your idea. So be aware of that, especially if you're hitting the holiday break or you're traveling or whatever. So just make sure that you reach out to a person as soon as you can to get that letter of recommendation, so you're not, scrambling at the last minute to get something to submit.
Yep. And again, to get on the portal, it will take 24 hours for us to approve you. So definitely make your account and register. I would say as soon as possible, but don't wait for the 6th to register, because then we might not be able to approve you until the 7th and you'll be scrambling then. Register as soon as possible, but just keep in mind that we will need, again, 24 hours minimum to approve you. It may not take that long, but yeah. So make sure you are registered before the deadline and have all your information in there by January 7th at 5 p.m. So then that would be the final step on your part for until you hear back from us. So after January 7th, boom, you submitted your application, you're good. The WFMN Innovators Grant Review Committee is going to meet in February. They will review all of the applicants. They're going to watch your videos, and they're going to come up with some recommendations to move forward for the new Innovators cohort. And then at that point, applicants will be notified in April of 2020. I know this seems a ways away, but it is a process. So we want to do our due diligence to our communities and making sure that we're taking the time to really review your applications and review each individual that wants to be an innovator. So you will be notified after you submit in January. You will hear back from us in April of 2020. And then if selected as the next cohort of innovators, the kickoff convening is on May 8th. And at that point, you will get your grant award dispersed in the form of a check at the kickoff convening, which is going to be May 8th. It's the Women's Foundation Economic Summit. So it's actually a pretty big day for us, and it's a huge event. So that's why we always kick off our innovators at this summit, because it really highlights the work you're doing. You all get to meet each other, and
we will take a lot of pictures. We celebrate the new cohort, and another thing. So with the grant awards, so we'll make sure you get the money. We'll also make sure part of the innovator convenings will also, you'll have leadership development opportunities on a quarterly basis. So you'll convene on a quarterly basis. So you'll get the dates for your convenings on May 8th.
Yep. And then following that, your grant period starts. As soon as you get your check in hand, the grant period starts in May of 2020 and goes again 12 months through the end of April of 2021. So that would be the period in which you have your funds, you have your project, that you will have a year to do whatever you submitted in your proposal and in your application.
Well, and another thing, I think it's also on the RFP, but we will also do evaluation. So how are things going? So check-ins, and then we also will make sure to ask for a final final product. of the work that you've done in the past year. So you'll get more details as obviously as you get selected and start the innovator cohort, but that's also part of the work you'll be doing. It's like, here is how I use the money, and this is what I learned.
Yep. Thank you, Jasmine. So this is the timeline. This is also in your RFP on one of the final pages. So just keep that in mind. Try and meet your deadlines ahead of time as much as possible. Have any questions, technical difficulties, reach out at any time. This information is going to be all, pretty readily available for you to review. If you forget, this webinar is recorded, so review it again if you need to. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining our webinar. I hope it was helpful and that you were able to get something out of it. If you have any questions, now would be the time. You can type them right into your comment box on the right side of the screen there. Let me pull this. There it went. And if there's no questions, that's okay. You can, again, I'm available via email. You can call as you're doing your application. If you want any feedback on your project idea, I can do that as well. If you want, there's more examples of innovator projects on the website. There was 33 innovators this past cohort year. So there's tons of ways that you can use this money to carry out a project. And it looks like there are no questions. So if there's no questions.
Yeah, and it's all right to kind of think about, I know there's a lot of information, super exciting, and we highly encourage you to apply if you meet the eligibility criteria. And I know that in the past we have had to say we've selected 33 last year, but we have had other young women who weren't selected but are still not part of our network and learn about other opportunities we may have. So like the Young Women's Cabinet members, who they really are an amazing group of women that are selected and appointed by the governor. So then you are in a network, even if you are selected, obviously you'll be in that network, but if you're not selected, then you learn more about what we do and what we're about. And so then you become part of this bigger network of women, young women across our state. So that's what's pretty amazing.
There's tons of ways to plug into the Young Women's Initiative. We don't turn anyone away. So good luck. Please, again, reach out to me with any questions you may have. I'm here to help you. I want everyone to be selected. Thank you for attending our webinar, and have a great evening.
Great, bye.
Bye.